there are some individuals who are disconnected from the experience of fellow humans, and they are disconnected because for two reasons. They offer sympathy when right now a lot of people are really in need of empathy to drive change. And I think that in terms of grief, grief in a general way is a response to a loss.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Welcome to today's episode. Today, I have Alexa Hudson with us. Alexa and I met. It's going to be, let me see, 2016. I've got to make my calculate here. 3.5 years ago. 3.5 years ago, we met. And we met in very uncertain times and times in which you probably don't necessarily want to meet people during those times, because it was during the time that our mom was very ill and we had to recur to hospice and palliative care services. And Alexa was the nurse assigned to my mom and to our home. And that is how we met. And she was just a ray of sunshine for our family during really, really hard times. And we connected. And even though my parents were not in the state where she was providing services when my mom passed away, you really did help us, by the way, Alexa, so much in that process. And I think we've told you thank you so many times, because you helped us make the transition of even from Atlanta to my mom going to Florida for the visit and be able to do that and help us with the services in Florida. And so it was just so much that you did for us. So first off, thank you. I want to say thank you. You're in front of everybody that's listening. So thank you so much. So, Alexa, I asked you to be on because I'm just so curious to know how somebody ends up becoming a hospice nurse. And I just have so many questions. But first off, just share with us a little bit about you, a mom, a wife, all that kind of stuff, good stuff.
Okay, yeah. So I am all of that. I am a mom. I have three children, a 16-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 7-year-old. I am a wife. I've been married to my husband. Uh, you would think I would know this number, but we met in college. We got married shortly after that. Um,
You're like me calculating how long we've known each other. Let
yeah,
me do do I have enough fingers to count? It's
yeah,
probably that. That's why
exactly.
you probably don't have enough fingers to count how long you've been together. That's why you lost track, Alexa.
I do. I'm like, gosh, has it really? And it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it's been a great time. But yes, I am also a hospice nurse. I actually am a certified hospice and palliative care nurse. I did go to grad school for a while to work on some advanced studies in hospice and palliative care, but my passion is really at the bedside with patients and families. It's just an amazing journey for me. I love every aspect of it. I never thought that I would be a hospice nurse. It's not something that most people plan, but I
Right.
am just eternally grateful that I have fallen into this career path.
Well, and that's what I'm curious. How did you fall into this career path? Like, and how long ago was that?
So, this was, a, I think, 2015,
Maybe I shouldn't
2014,
ask you
2015.
anything. Maybe I shouldn't ask anything that has to do with numbers.
But I know, right? But no, it was about
How long
2014,
ago? I'm joking.
and
We're
I,
losing track of time.
I was
2015?
yeah, it was like the end of 2014, beginning of
Oh, 2014.
2015.
Okay.
I was actually, my own family members were actually, they were critically ill and they required hospice care. And there were two different kind of pathways that we took because one was my grandfather and the other was
Mhm.
my great grandmother.
Oh,
And
wow. Great-grandmother.
yeah,
You got to
my
meet
great
your
grandmother.
great-grandmother. Wow.
And she was an incredibly active lady. Even in her advanced age, she was very, very active. She was very independent. She lived by herself until she was 90, about 6 months before she died. She lived by herself.
Wow.
And my grandfather, on the other hand, he had, oh, his prognosis was a little bit longer. He developed Parkinson's disease, but it was a pretty advanced and rare form of Parkinson's, so it progressed very, very rapidly. And when we first heard hospice, the word is scary. There's a stigma that that word carries, and so our immediate response was like, absolutely not. Like we're not even thinking about death because that's what the word meant to us. Um, but then we learned a little bit about just the benefits, the help that we could get. And it was easier to have someone come into the home to at least do medical checkups than trying to take a person with advanced Parkinson's or my great grandmother who had advanced respiratory disease out to a doctor's office. Um, but at that time, I was not a hospice nurse. I was just a regular nurse, actually going through grad school at the time. And I remember, I remember there was a day where there were 2 days in particular, and they were kinda back to back. I would visit my grandmother's house, and both my great-grandmother and my grandfather were living with my grandmother, and she was trying to take care of them, and I would visit all the time. And my great-grandmother was in the room, and my mother was trying to feed her and encouraging her to just eat eggs and bacon and sausage and whatever. And for the first time, she just seemed frustrated. My great-grandmother did, and she was like, "Enough." And that moment just kinda triggered something in me, and I didn't know what it was. And about 2 days later, my grandmother would constantly check my great-grandmother's oxygen saturation, and people are obsessed with that little machine, and I think her
With the
oxygen sat
oxygen you mean with the
yes.
oxygen saturation? You mean people? You're talking about in general, like, now you know how obsessed people are
Yes.
because of what you do? Okay, so why is that? Why is it that?
I think it's because, we live vicariously through the people that we love. And
Mm,
so we as humans and throughout our lives, we're kind of programmed to think about things being in a normal range. And that word is not unique to individuals and individual circumstances. So when we think about normal and we see something that doesn't fall within that normal range that we've been programmed to accept, we start to panic. And that happened. Her oxygen dropped down to, I think, the mid 80s, and and after that, she said, my grandmother started to panic and was like, "We've got to take her to the hospital. She needs to go. She's." And my response was very, um, it was not. I didn't act with as much urgency, I suppose. And I said, "Well, she really doesn't wanna go to the hospital, maybe we should just leave her here, and let's just sit her up, and let's just help her breathe, and
mm,
she wants to stay home, she's comfortable," but the number scared the rest of my family members,
mm.
and, um, there was no one there to advocate for her, and it was very important for my great grandmother to always stay home in her bed where she was comfortable. She didn't want to go to the hospital, and my family could not fathom that. They had a very hard time understanding that sometimes doing less is doing more. And my great grandmother ended up passing away in the hospital by herself.
Oh,
And it
oh, no.
was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And
Oh, it was so this
um,
just totally, was it traumatic for you because you knew that it was not her will and her desire to be away from her home? Was
yeah, I
that
mean,
something that impacted you? I don't know, traumatic, I don't know if that's the right word, but that just kinda stuck with you, the fact that her wishes were not granted?
it was upsetting.
Upsetting,
It
okay, that
was upsetting,
mm,
and I think for me, it was upsetting because I just wanted her to have what she wanted,
mhm,
and it was upsetting for my grandmother and my mom and the rest of the family because they they wanted to do everything that they could, and
mhm,
they wanted her to have what they thought she should have, and so that was, again, living vicariously through her. Um,
mm,
just kind of placing themselves, if my oxygen level was 85,
mm,
that would be a problem for most people, but most people weren't in her condition.
mhm,
And so accepting that change in life, no matter how you look at what happens after our life here on earth, that's a very mysterious and hard concept for people to come to accept. And so that was the moment that I just felt called to advocate for
mm.
people in that same situation. And so I actually got an invitation from another nurse who was doing hospice care, and she said, you should just come. We need another nurse." And the rest is history. I became a hospice nurse, and I've done it ever since.
Wha And now how long was okay, your great-grandmother passed before your grandfather?
Actually, she died about 3 weeks after he did.
After oh, so it was really close to get and then
It was
where did he pass away? At the hospital too?
No, he actually passed away at home. Um,
Okay.
he passed away at home because I think I think the symptoms of his disease process were
Mhm,
different, and so it wasn't anything that, directly correlated with distress or things that people correlate with, say, without having oxygen, people think
right,
suffocation, so they
discomfort,
panic.
correct, right, yes.
He was just, we saw him slowly kind of fall
Mm,
asleep and sleep deeper and deeper, but there was no obvious signs of distress or
mhm,
a lack of oxygen, or there was nothing like that. And so it was a little bit easier for him to pass away at home. And um, in fact, when he passed away, my grandmother kept him at home and she didn't tell anybody for several hours.
is this the same let me just kind of sorry, I have to create
Yeah.
this image and in my head. Is the grandmother is this grandmother the daughter of your great-grandmother, or is this on the other
Yes.
side of the family? Okay, so she lost her husband and her mom within 3-week period?
Yes.
Oh, wow, okay. Okay, sorry. So
So,
then for her,
yeah.
so now sorry, thank I just wanted to kind of know if it was on the same side. Okay, so then continue with that part with how she was then. So she left she was okay with him being home, but she was
Mhm.
but with her own mom because of her symptoms, she really did feel the urgency of taking her to the hospital for
Mhm.
when her oxygen was low. Okay. So that was kind of
Yep.
like contrasting a little bit there.
It was. And so, you know, when you look at those 2 different scenarios and you try to understand the grieving process, it paints 2 very different but very similar pictures.
Mhm.
Um, People anticipate the death of someone, and so they start grieving early,
Mhm.
but I think that watching watching that end of life process unfold, it kind of it kind of dictates or guides that path that people take into their post-death grief, if that makes sense.
So how they handle the diagnosis process and and then the from there on watching their loved one kind of deteriorate with their health on your dictates how they're going to grieve after. Yes, is that what you're stating?
I think so.
Okay.
I
So you can
think
see that, and so you could see that relationship there with how your mom was, your grandmother, um, and you've seen it also in some of the other cases then with with what you do.
yes. Um, I what I have noticed in terms of a pattern, um, I've noticed that people people respond to disease progression and death and dying based on what they're prepared for. And by preparation, it comes down to honesty.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, people, meaning family members, are not afforded the opportunity to process what to expect because delivering that hard truth is very
Mm,
difficult.
mhm, and this it comes from the medical perspective as well, right? Like, even as a nurse yourself, like, to actually say to somebody what it is, even that is an aspect of truth that is hard to even deliver that news.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah,
very
every single
difficult.
time. Even though you do it for a living, it's still something it takes a lot. A lot from you. And do you have to also probably know the family as slightly or kind of known a little bit of their character for maybe a couple times to know how to deliver the news?
That would be an ideal situation.
But it doesn't happen because you normally are called you can normally
Yeah.
call are called right at the moment in which it's already sometimes in the last few months of somebody's life.
It sometimes I kn
Yeah.
I'll give you an example.
Yes, please do.
I I went to, admit a lady, and she was a fairly young lady, and when I got to her house, for me, it was abundantly clear that this woman was dying,
Mm,
and, her husband was frustrated, very much so, at her because he said, "I don't understand. She was up, she was walking around, and now she just doesn't wanna get up. She doesn't wanna do anything. She doesn't wanna eat. I don't know what the problem is."
mm.
And so
Denial, absolute
yes.
denial. Whoa.
Well, it was it
But it's
was
surprising.
denial.
But it was
It
surprised him
was.
too because it caught him off guard that she was fine, and then all of a sudden she wasn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so after a few minutes, I kinda started talking to him about, "Well, this is kinda what's going on," and that's where you try to be gentle because you don't know where a person's emotional state is. How much can they handle? So I
Yes.
try to start introducing that information very, very gently. And the man said to me, "Well, how soon do you think she's going to get better? Because
Mm,
we're planning a trip to Jamaica in August." And August may have been about four, maybe 4 or 5 months away. I think this was in like March or April.
oh my gosh,
And
how do you tell them? How do you tell them?
I
Mm,
that was a pretty pivotal moment for me because I had 2 options to either tell this man a lie or tell him the
mhm,
truth. And so I told him that I asked him if he would mind going into another room where we could sit down. I really wanted to talk to him, and I thought it would be easier to talk outside of the patient's company. That way she could rest and we weren't
mhm,
disturbing her. And I explained to him first with the facts. This is what I see. This is what the blood pressure is. This is what the oxygen level is. It was the very objective facts that he could see and I
mhm.
could see together. And then I eased into, this is what it means to me.
Mm.
And I said to him, I said, when I see all of these things start to line up at the same time, it usually indicates that this person is really starting to progress toward the end of their life on earth.
Mhm.
It's easier, I think, for most people to hear it like that because
Mhm.
I didn't make it absolute, and I don't believe in making anybody's life an absolute value, like they're gonna die today or they're gonna die tomorrow, because I don't know.
Right, you're only going by what, like, just what you said, this is the evidence. This evidence based on whatever other comparisons I have from other patients, this is what this normally means, and this is
Yes,
what I can take from this information, this is what it normally means, and that's basically what you
yes,
gave him. And that's actually,
yes.
I believe that's how you presented it to us too in that process too. You were just so kind and just so just so generous and with your smile and caring and just so comprehensive. So I'm just picturing all the love and how it is you share as you're telling this. So how did he take it in that moment?
In that
What did he
moment,
do when you gave him that kind of, like, when you were telling him the signs, when you were saying, okay, so you see oxygen is this is this, the liver function is this, or whatever, all the whatever signs were, and was it registering for him in that moment, like, when you were just giving the evidence?
I think there was a combination. I think it registered, and he was trying to digest what he, I think, in his heart knew was happening, but did
Mm,
not want to
mhm,
accept. And so he momentarily clung to what he was last told by his physician or his wife's physician, which was, it looks like the tumor is shrinking.
mhm. The hope. He held
Yes.
on to that little bit of, okay.
And he was like, I don't understand. The doctor said that the tumor is shrinking. It went from this size to that size. What are
Mhm,
you talking about? And I said, again, very, very direct with people. Sometimes, even though tumors may shrink, the disease itself can spread and it will cause multi-system failure. And right now, when I see this number, I get into more of an explanation. This is why I'm seeing this number. This is why her blood pressure might be going lower. This is
mhm,
why oxygen is not getting higher. And then it starts to process and comprehend. And then together we come up with a plan. I try to introduce people to what to expect next, because that's the scariest part. You don't know what to expect. And I find that most families start to struggle the most with themselves. Are they doing the right thing or are they not?
mhm, mhm,
Are they going to be the reason that their loved one has passed away? Are they
mm,
forgetting to do something crucial? And
mm.
so it becomes a much
In
more
terms of the
spiritual
care?
path
In
in
terms of
terms
the
of
care
care,
itself? Mhm,
care, what to look for, because the
mhm,
second someone maybe takes a gasp for air,
mhm, mhm,
that's scary, and people don't know how to process that. So they immediately start to think, "Okay, I missed something, I didn't do something, or I need to do something different." And
mm,
it's all emotional, it's all spiritual, it's all education.
mm,
And I try to shift people away from what I call the numbers. Don't worry about those numbers. This is what mom's body's doing, dad's body's doing, wife's body is doing
mhm,
to adjust to the changes that are taking place as different organ systems get weaker and eventually shut down. And reassuring them that this process does not indicate any kind of pain. And I am here to ensure that there is no evidence of any kind of struggle or suffering.
mm.
And then people are usually okay.
They're more at ease. Right now, when you said, the part of, and this is what's happening to mom's body or dad's body, how how, how do you talk to the kids when they have, I mean, when there are, yeah, children, like what is the language that you talk to them about death and the process of their parent passing, and that, and or about to pass? um what is some of the language that you use to describe it to them? Was it in the same way, similar to what you just described right now?
Not quite the same. When I talk to children, and I will say this, children are amazing.
They're so right.
They
Yeah.
I mean, I it blows my mind um, how resilient and how
Hmm.
strong they are, and they see things and know things that we often don't give them credit for.
Yes.
And I will let children lead the conversation.
That is gold right there, what you said, because that way you can kind of know where it is they stand rather than inputting your own. And this is a great, I just got chills because it's a good, and every single podcast, there's a moment in which I get chills, and every single interview. And this was one of them for me right now with you, because it's like a huge lesson, even as a parent, that sometimes I need to know what is it that my kids know and what is it that they understand before I input my own perspective and my viewpoint onto them, kind of taking the cues off of them rather than me inputting. And so what you just said now, even in this aspect of death, that's huge, Alexa. That's awesome. Okay, so tell us how walk us through a little bit of what that would look like, because that I'm just intrigued now by that.
So, depending on the age of the child, of course, um, children comprehend what's going on, or they process
Hmm.
what's going on differently. For some children, especially when they are younger, maybe 5 and younger, or 6 and younger, they tend to find something tangible that they cling to in place of that person. And or they find a certain hobby that kind of replaces the energy that they were sharing or exchanging with that person. They now invested into this other object or hobby or task. And so I engage in that with them. And we have we have a very real conversation. There are certain words that I try not to use, and there are certain words that I try to be very cognizant of using with children. And one of the words that I make an effort to use, believe it or not, is death or dying.
Mm.
And the
Instead of
reason
instead of saying passing away,
mhm,
instead of what, passing away.
I try not to say loss or
Yes.
gone
Yes.
or, I try not to use those words. I try to use very concrete words with children because
Mm.
children are concrete thinkers. And when I tell them that, oh, you lost your dad, well, sometimes
Or
they're
do you
like, okay,
find
but
sometimes
when
you
am I
lose
going to
something and you
find him?
find it. Exactly. Yes. That is just wow. That is just so important right now to as a as a parent to listen to that. That is so true. Okay. So then
Um,
using concrete words in order to
yeah.
define, that's amazing. Okay.
And when they ask, like I said, I let children lead the conversation, and when they ask me questions, I answer their questions very honestly, but I use vocabulary that I think they're going to understand. If they ask me, well, what is happening to my dad?
Hmm.
Of course, with the other parent or the other guardian's permission, well, dad's heart is getting weaker. And so eventually, dad's heart is not going to be able to pump blood the way that it normally does, which means dad's going to stop breathing.
Mm.
And I'm very concrete with them, and I will share my stethoscope with them, and I will really try to engage them in that process so that they can see what's happening. And then we talk about more of the relationship and the emotional aspect. However, even though dad is not doing well, and even though his body is dying, dad still loves you. We still have memories, we still have pictures, and we're going to keep dad's memory alive through all
Hmm.
of these other things.
Mm.
and
N-
usually they process.
And then that's what the process. Now, do you have to talk to, sometimes also get to know what people's spiritual backgrounds are around death in that process of helping them in that transition for their loved ones? Like, for example, with a child like this, if by chance, I don't know, if they're, I mean, if you know for sure somebody's religious and that, like you already know that they have permission, for you to say soul or, to use the word their soul, whatever. Does it make sense what I'm saying? Like, do you
It does.
kind of, yeah, do you talk about that aspect with some of the families before having some of these conversations?
That conversation is one of the very first conversations I have when I first meet a family.
Hmm.
I want to know right off the bat, are there any cultural or religious considerations that I need to learn or bear in mind when delivering your care?
Hmm.
Because that is very much ingrained to who the person is and what their experience is going to be. And I don't want to miss a step because I overlook a very, very important part of someone's life, their spirituality. So
Yes.
that's kind of number one on the list. Tell me about
Hmm.
yourself. Tell me what you believe in. Um, and I have been invited to participate in some pretty incredible spiritual ceremonies and traditions during the death and dying process as a result. So
Hmm.
it's been an incredible experience.
Yeah, because you've gotten to see the cultural perspective and religious perspective of so many different people and how they relate to death, uh, and their beliefs about death and action, in action, not just in words, right? Like you're actually
Exactly.
seeing exactly what it is they believe because of how they're either celebrating the life or whatever it is that different cultures or religions may do for that process. That is huge. It's like you like a big university learning there, right there, life learning, learning all these cultures and religions just by living in them. Um, yeah. Now, a question: how do you process then for yourself every single lesson, because you also become it then some attachment, of course, to the families, depending also on how long you've been with them or the type of relationships. So for you to have death be part of your life at a daily basis, how and what do you do in order to care for you?
Um, you know, I always think I have the answer to that, and I just I have a hard time putting it into words, but I think one of the things that I do, because I absolutely get attached to families. I mean, your family is an obvious one. Like
Yes, and
I
she, and by FYI, she went to the memorial. I wasn't there because I was out in Georgia and I was not able to go to the memorial after what is it, like a month after my mom's passing, that they had a celebration in Atlanta and Alexa was there. And I know that that was big and super important in our family. So thank you. So you become attached. And so, but yeah, so how do you, yeah, what do you do?
so there's a couple things that I do. Before the patients that I'm caring for pass away, I I take a moment to recognize their grief. And I think a lot of times their grief is just overlooked or missed because they are the ones that I guess the family is losing, but they too are losing their family and they're processing that. And I think about that, and that's what I connect to, and that's what I cling to, and that's what makes it easier for me to work through this process with them and be by their side because I feel like I've just joined this person in helping them cope with their grief. So I don't
Because
feel quite the same loss as the family.
that is because they have to not, they're the ones that have just been given a diagnosis of their own life. The patient is the
Mhm.
one that is the one, like what you just said. It's interesting because us selfishly we think is about ourselves that are left behind rather than thinking even just how hard it is for the person that actually is living leaving this mortal plane, and that is eye-opening what you just said right there.
I I I think about it, it humbles me, and this is, I guess, what kind of gives me my momentum.
Mm,
Where that person, whomever they might be, where they are in life when they sit back and they reflect and they reconcile and they try to come to terms with leaving their family behind. Because, and I tell families this all the time, moms are still moms, dads are still dads, and they're going to worry about their children and their
mm,
grandchildren and their husbands and their wives. They worry about this stuff.
mhm,
I would. And
mhm,
so I carry that with me. And it's it's one of the reasons I like to stay in touch with families that I've been a part of, because it it gives me continual closure to see that the family is doing all right.
mm. It's
Um,
kind of like you're being the eyes to some extent if you've kind of been living the the grieving process of the patient. For you to then see the family go on and be okay, it's as if you're seeing it's as if the patient's being able to see them through your eye. I don't I'm kind of
yeah.
maybe sounding a little bit like kind of but you know what I mean.
Mhm.
um because you've kind of been living it on that perspective. That is so beautiful. And it makes me wonder, how does it make you then feel by being able to see different people and the way that they've been able to go through their grieving process? How does it make you feel about your own mortality? Because you, again, all of us, everybody thinks about that, right? And it's like, but it's just, it still doesn't feel like it's like in the forefront of our lives every single day, right? Because we don't work in the environment you do, but you do. Like, is it something that comes up in your thoughts about yourself and about your own mortality? And I'm kind of going maybe outside. Maybe I'm going on an angle that you didn't
No.
know I was gonna go, but just
No,
curious.
absolutely. It does. Absolutely. I think about it all the time, every day. It is a part of who I am now.
Hmm.
Because I it drives me to try to be the very best person I can be and make sure that those who are around me are as prepared as possible for my death should it occur all of a sudden.
Mm. With that said, do you then talk about your kids then about death? Off, since it's part of your job description, um, and since it's in your thoughts, is it something you talk to them about death in general, about like if I die or dad die, or do you kind of shield them from it un, until it's gonna be, you know what I mean? Like, what do you do to prepare them in the case that something's sudden? Because that's something I think all of us parents always think of. How do
Well,
we
I talk
prepare
to
them?
my children about it. And I talk to them about it because, with what I do,
Hmm.
I there's something called work-life balance, but in this field, at least for me, you never really separate yourself from work.
Yeah, yeah.
You're carrying your patients' lives home with you because you have people that depend on you, or at least I feel like they depend on me. And sometimes that dependency is just knowing that they have someone to call in case they don't know what to do or in case they have a question. It gives people comfort. So my phone, for
Right, you're
example,
like on
is like
call. Yeah, you're on call.
it's always
You're
on.
on call. You're on call. Yeah.
Um, and so there are many times where I will come home late or I will leave my house very early. I will get up in the middle of whatever's going on a weekend and say, "Hey, you know what, guys? I gotta run because, this family needs me."
Mm,
And when I first started this, my kids didn't know what they were like, "Why do you always what is going on?" But now they
mhm,
understand that it's really a calling, and I don't consider it a job. It's just
mhm.
me
Serving,
offering
serving.
my sup
Yeah,
yeah, just serving, offering my
serving.
support to families who need me.
Mhm,
That's it.
mhm,
So I talk to them about death. I talk to them about dying. Sometimes, I make light of it for them to be able to process it. Like,
mhm,
when I die, this is what we're going to do. But
mhm.
I need them to be comfortable with it so that it lessens the trauma because it's going to happen one day.
Absolutely, yeah, it's like that's the thing, it's one death is one of those things that we all know happens. It's like it's more guaranteed than even birth because you know what I mean? Like, you don't like, does you know what I mean? Like, birthing is not even as guaranteed as dying. Having a child is not as guaranteed as all the fact that we all are going to die. Everybody that's had a life is going to die. And it's still something that we're so not prepared. And part of it is exactly because of what you're saying. We do not talk about it. It's not like, oh, when I get married, I want to wear this veil, da, 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 da. Oh, when I become a mommy, da, da, da. All these other life transitions we talk about and dream about, but we don't talk about, oh, when I die, I'd love for you guys to do this and to like do this, da, da, da. No, we don't.
Nope.
It's like so weird. It's like, I don't know if it's just in certain, I'm assuming there's some cultures in which it is more open to talk about it in that way. Have you experienced anything like that in which in some maybe cultures that you've been able to help because it's a very diverse area in Atlanta that maybe they're more open, that the patient themselves has already talked about that to their family?
The cultures that I have found to be most open with talking about death are those cultures that value their legacy. And so they
Mm,
spend their lives working on who they are going to be remembered as. And so that moment of finality or what is seemingly final, death,
mm, mm,
is it's a monument, it's a milestone and this is the defining moment. This is how I'm going to be remembered. And those are the cultures and the families that talk about death and dying. Other
mm,
families are afraid of it because it seems so final and it almost seems like lights out. The
mm,
eyes
mm,
close and it's just darkness, and that scares people.
mhm,
So I try to take the fear away from it. I don't I don't consider myself afraid to die. I know that it's going to happen. I just hope that my children are in a place where they can take care of themselves and cope with me not being
mm,
around, and then I'm okay with it.
mhm.
That's my only fear. Like, are they
Like
gonna
you
be in
said,
a position where if I die, they'll be traumatized? Like,
well,
but
it's
other
just
than
like
that,
what you said,
it's
because you
real.
don't stop being a mom. You're still caring for, are they good? Are they ready? Are they ready? And a lot of times, I'm sure a lot of the patients, even like when they know that they're, and I know that even for our mom, she wanted to kind of hold on a little bit because there was things she kind of wanted to make sure were done before she died. Because she didn't want to leave a burden on us type of thing, right? So you're still always also thinking of your children and your loved ones in that process. So what you're saying right now is just the motherly thing to do. You're like, I hope they're ready. I hope they're okay to cope because really for us when we do pass each individual, like it's not like I mean, depending on whatever anybody believes what happens after death, but really it's you're more worried about those that are being left behind kind of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it comes down to for
The
me.
living.
I'm just
Mhm.
like, I hope y'all are gonna be all right. Like, I'll be all right. I'm sure. Are y'all gonna be all right? So,
So,
you know,
that is so
I
awesome to be transparent, and I that's awesome.
and so, I told what is it? My 7-year-old. I asked him one day. I said, who's going to take care of me when I get older? And he turned around and he looked at me and he said, well, I'm going to take care of you when you get old, and I'll take care of you when you get sick. I'm going to be a
Oh,
hospice nurse just like you.
oh
And I was
my
like,
goodness.
you know, so,
Oh.
you know, it just, it's just, appreciating life, trying to be a good person, and, reconciling your differences with people. That's what it's about.
Mm. Oh, gold. Gold. And right there, that's even just right now, that's the gratitude in this process of grieving and stuff is all these things that you just said of being around death so often that it really makes you value life so much more and being way more in tune and alert. Am I leaving a legacy? Am I being able to fulfill my life in a way that is meaningful? Am I being of service? um am I leaving a mark some way or another in somebody's life, right? That's
Yeah,
really kind
I
of what you the way that you see life.
that is what it that is what it comes down to for me. Um, there are certain words or statements that in my household are not allowed to be used.
Oh,
And it goes back to
okay.
that point of just being gracious for everything that we have. And one of the things that my kids, especially, they are not allowed to say is, today's a bad day,
Mm,
or it's not fair. And I'm like, you're not allowed to say that. And you're not
mhm.
allowed to say it because you have no idea in your very privileged life
What fair is.
what fair is or what a
Mm,
bad day is.
mhm,
A
mhm.
bad day is, sitting in a doctor's office learning and being told that you've only got a matter of months left. That's a bad day. You know,
Mhm.
you don't get to say that in this house because you don't appreciate life enough. You're not experienced in life enough to be able to
To
make
be
a
able to
statement
say
like
that
that.
statement. Yep, yep. The fair too, and anytime my kids say that's not fair, I'm like, oh, do you know what's not fair? And then I start saying, do you know what's not fair? It's not fair that children are starving. Da, da, da. Like I start going into these things. Do you know what's not fair? Like I start giving that's not
Yes.
fair. I start going into these rants, and I'm like, so no, don't be telling me about fair.
Yeah,
Like
no,
that's
I
not.
just that's how it is. They can't say that they're starving. I'm like,
Oh, yeah. Oh, that one too. Don't even to you. I'm gonna show you what starving looks like. I'll show you what starving looks like. I do the same. I'm like, I anything that's like finite, like as if it's
yes.
like, whoa. And I know that it's part of like I mean, I know. I'm like, I've used that term. By the way, I've used it and I have to like reprogram myself to not use it because it was like how I grew up. It's all drama, being Hispanic, like that drama, telenovela, everything's a
Yeah.
soap opera. so, so, and plus I studied theater. So of course everything's more over the top. But, but yeah, but those things that are finite, the same with emotions. What you just said about I'm having a bad day. You just had a bad moment, a bad minute, a bad
Moment.
second, yes, a moment. You didn't have a bad day. You can't say that your whole day is completely out the window based on just this one instant that you just had. You can't say that. You woke up, you had breakfast, da, 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 you had that, then you had a bad moment. You can't say you had a bad day. So yeah, I'm with you with that. And I think it's important to say those things to our kids because it's a learning also experience for ourselves. Because as I'm telling you, I've said oh my gosh, I'm starving. I've said that term even though I don't like my kids to say it. And I tell them not to say things like that. I'm also learning myself as I'm teaching them to reprogram myself.
But we all
So
do it.
yeah, right, right, right. Yeah, because it's part of like again, back to like culture and things we're used to saying. But it makes us think really what is really true. And to stop gosh, I'm like making even things be so, what's the word I'm is escaping, right now for me. The thing that we label things and make them be like as if that's a fact and that it's not changeable. So, I tell my kids things sometimes statements of the, "I am something." I'm like, "No, yes, you can only say that when it's something that is not gonna change." Like, but when it's a moment of like, I can say I am a woman, I am a mother. I can't say I am dumb, for example. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Or things like that. I tell them you can't say that kind of stuff because you're not that, you know what I mean? You can't label something like that and make it be part of who you are. You can't use those kind of expressions. Those are the things I'm constantly trying to reframe how they use those words. Anything that's making themselves feel less than. You know what I mean? Different if like I am
exactly.
smart. That yeah, go ahead. Say I'm smart. You could say that even that. But the things that are gonna like negative connotations. Now, how do you juggle all this back to like juggling with parenting and doing and taking care of others and where and how do you find time for you? When you're caring and caring and caring, caring for children, caring for people that are dying, caring for the families that are left behind. Where does Alexa fit time for herself? What's your self care? As a
Oh,
caretaker, what
um,
is your self care?
I try to follow the advice that I give to nearly everyone that I encounter, and it is I try to take it one moment at a time.
Mhm,
I can't always plan and, have this airtight schedule and, you know, I'm gonna go to yoga at 7 o'clock and
mhm.
that's it. I can't always do that.
Mm,
I can't always have dinner on the table at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. I live in the moment. I make the most of each moment, and if I have an opportunity to just sit back and rest, then that's when I take it. But I also think that taking time for me doesn't always mean only thinking about me or only doing something for me or only just resting. Sometimes I'm taking time for me when I get up on a Saturday to go see a family because
mm.
it's important to me to do that. So finding time for me
Wow,
just comes when it comes.
that is so important. What you just said is so moving because you're basically the reason that it's time for you, even if it's going to see a family, is because even though it's again your way of serving, it's still so aligned to who you are. So it's still keeping true to you, even though you're working by going to see a family. It's still time for
Mhm.
you because you're being in alignment with you. If you were doing something that you were not passionate about and did not fulfill your trueness and your who you are and what you were meant to be doing on this earth, then maybe that would going in, I don't know, whatever. I don't want to say any particular job description right now instead of that, but something that just was not you, then that may not be your time. But because this is in alignment with you, then
Yeah,
you're following your calling. So for you, it still feels like it's you time. It's me time.
yeah, it's what I wanna do. I mean, and I'll yeah, I used to sometimes find that my husband I would volunteer to do a lot of overtime, and my husband, he'd be
Does
like,
he know? Does he know you were
"Why are you"
volunteering? Does he know you were volunteering and
he
not
d well,
because
he didn't quite know because he would say, "Why are you working so much?" Or, "Why is
Yeah,
your phone still ringing?" And I'm like,
yeah.
"Oh, well, yeah, I don't know, it's" or I would tell him, "Hey, I'll be right back. I'm gonna make a quick run. I'll be right down the street. I'll be right back. No worries." Wouldn't tell him what I was doing, but it would be me taking my time and for me, because I
To
wanted
do
to go and I wanted to go visit somebody, or I wanted to check on it gave me peace of mind to know that that
Yes, yes.
person was okay, and so that's how I use my time, and for him, he's like, "But you're working," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it just feels like the right thing to do, it doesn't feel like work,
Well,
so I'm doing it because
oh,
I want to."
that is like a big thing too, because a lot of times, you know how there's that saying that you basically choose a life you don't have to have a vacation from to some extent, like, or choose you,
Mhm.
and that's basically what you're doing because you are doing something you love so much that even going to work is still part of your life, that it feels good. It feels good, and you don't feel like you're working when you're going to check on these families. So you definitely followed your calling, girl. You definitely did. And that I am just so grateful that you did, because otherwise you might have not crossed our lives. And I'm just so
I
grateful.
You know what I think of? And I don't know if I'm sure you remember this. This was when, do you remember when you guys were getting ready to get your mom
To
packed up
Florida.
so she could catch the flight to
Yeah.
Florida?
Yes. Yeah.
And we were trying to get her an oxygen tank.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because she was
And
already oxygen dependent. Uh-huh.
yes, and I was like, I was calling the equipment company and I'm like, I need to get this out here. She's going to be leaving and it has to be here in the morning. And they're like, we're not gonna bring it. There's just no I was so upset that day. I don't know if you guys could tell. I was
Well,
so upset
no,
with them.
well, because you know what? You were so, again, going back to what you were saying about being able to fulfill the wishes of the patient. You knew how important it was for my mom to travel to Florida, even though her health was not really in a situation in which she should have been traveling. You just put yourself in her shoes, and you knew that that was important for her, and that's why probably you were so passionate. You're like, "No, I need that oxygen." So what happened? I don't even
No.
remind me what happened, because I was not in on that side. I just know my mom made it to Florida. I don't remember if you did get an oxygen tank on. I
Particulars?
know that what happened? Tell me.
So, what happened was, I remember her asking me, it was her and your dad, and she said, "Do you think it's okay for me to make this trip, or do you think I
Mhm,
should wait?" And I said, "Look, do I think that you're in the best condition? No. I would be doing you a disservice if I told you, 'Oh, yeah, everything's great,' but
mhm,
I think the longer you wait, the lesser your chances will be for you to get there. So if you're
mhm.
gonna go, you need to go, and we're gonna make sure that you get there." And so I was on the phone, like, arguing with this oxygen company, and finally they're like, "Well, we're just not gonna do it. I don't know what to tell you, and we'll try to get it there tomorrow, but it'll be," they were giving me this crazy window of time. I said, "Okay, I don't know what we need to do, but I'm gonna drive down there." And they were in Covington. I said, "I'm gonna drive down to Covington," which was
I don't even know
about
where that, yeah, how far, where is that? South?
it's
Is it south of Atlanta? I don't even know where it
it's
is.
south of where your parents lived. I would say it's probably about
Okay,
45 minutes.
okay.
Well, yeah, about
Look
45
at that.
minutes or
That's
so.
when you told your husband. What's your husband's name?
Irving.
You're like, "Oh, Irving, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna go run a little errand. We're gonna run a little errand, 45-minute
I did tell
drive to
him
go
that
pick up a what?"
because he was I think I did tell him something like that because he's like, "Well, where are you at? What time are you gonna be home?" And I was like, I think I said, "Oh, well, I'm finishing up with, a patient. I should be headed home soon." And then I rerouted, and I drove to
Oh,
Covington to
and
pick up the
traffic
oxygen.
and traffic in Atlanta. Nice, nice.
Yes,
That's
and then I
not
drove it back to your mom's house.
oh
I
gosh,
remember
you're
I
an
remember
angel.
getting there, and he was like, "Well, where are you?" I said, "Oh, well, I'm just caught in some traffic and blah, blah,
Oh
blah," but
gosh. Well, he's
I
gonna know
remember that.
now. He's gonna know now when he listens to this how many times now he's gonna be checking to make sure that when you do say, "I'm just gonna go run an errand," if should I not
But,
tag you on the post when I post this? So he
oh,
doesn't
it's fine.
I'm
But,
joking.
it's moments like that that make it
Yeah.
so worth it.
Yes,
Those
because
are the
you know
moments
what
that
it
I
meant.
remember.
Well, the fact that you remember, and again, this was 3.5 years ago, the fact that you remember those details about it, and it's huge because you see a lot of patients, and for you to remember those things, it's like it means a lot to me as a family member, of somebody that had your services, that you remember that. And the fact that you helped with the process of when we got to, when my mom got to Florida, her insurance was not one that was in that state. And like, whatever you guys did with your company, with the company that then took care of her, you guys just made it all so seamless. And my mom got exactly her wishes, and which were to be with her family when she would pass away. And that's exactly what was possible just because she was in another state. I don't think we would have been able to do that if they had been in Atlanta. Like, it would have not been possible for all of us to be able to be in my parents' home and and just be there on time. We could have not been all
Yeah.
sleeping in the same house, which we were able to do at my sister's house. It's like,
Hmm.
so it was just it was just orchestrated by whoever we want to believe, or whoever each one of us wants to know that orchestrates things like this. I don't believe in coincidences. I think things just kind of
Yeah.
happen when they need to happen, and the people that come into your life for a reason. And you're a good example of that. Thank you for getting her that oxygen tank, for
Oh
driving
yeah. I
45
mean,
minutes.
it's it was, but I mean, it just it was worth it. It was totally
Mhm.
worth it. And then the thing is, she forgot it at home. She didn't even take it with her.
Oh, oh, I forgot that detail, you're right. Oh my gosh, and then we had to then when she got to to Florida, then they had to try to get one from the palliative care there to my sister's house, to the right? The
Yeah.
hospice there had,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, all
Cause,
that.
cause she called, or somebody called. I think it might have been your sister. She called me. She says, "We left the oxygen. I know you don't want to hear that." And I was like, I
No.
was like, "Oh my gosh, oh gosh." But you know what? In that moment, I didn't care about anything
Mm,
else. The only thing I was focused on was, we've
mm,
got to get her some oxygen.
mhm.
So, I mean, it just makes it worth it, and it still feels good. It
Yeah,
just
and you
feels
know
good
what?
to be invited into your life.
And at that moment too, maybe you just had to be able to go and do that drive, because it was going to be the last time you were going to see my mom too. It
Mhm.
was the last time you were going to see her. So maybe that it was really not the point about the oxygen itself, but the fact that you were able to see her before she traveled, and because she passed away a few weeks after.
Yep.
Uh so we never know. Sometimes things happen exactly again how they're meant to be, even though you did drive for a long time to
Oh,
get that.
that was like I said, that wasn't
That
even
was your
the
me time.
I didn't even care about that. I just,
Oh.
it made it made her happy to know
Mm,
that she was going to be able to get to Florida.
mhm,
And even if that oxygen was just a token of security
mhm,
to help her sleep at night so that she could get up and get on that plane, it was worth it. It was
mhm,
100, 200% worth it.
mm,
So there were just absolutely no regrets, no frustration. It's something that I sit back and, it just gives me
mm.
a story to talk about. Like,
Yes,
yeah, I
it is
remember
a
one
story.
lady, but I have a box and I keep this little box. Well, I guess it's kind of average size, but anyway. And I have little tokens that each of my families that I've taken care of have shared with me.
Oh,
So, like, I still have your mom's funeral program
oh, that's
and
beautiful.
the card because I someone made cards with flowers.
That's my mom. They're made by my mom.
Oh, and I
The
still have
pressed
it.
Yeah, so
Yes.
those my mom had made these. We have, like, they're pressed, yeah, like dried flowers. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
those my mom and her friend, had made some some years back, and they had made a whole bunch, and so yeah, that's, handmade. You have a handmade card by my mom?
And I still have
Oh.
it. And I don't ever I always think about who would I share that with, but I keep it to myself because it's
Mm,
special to me.
mm,
Um, you know, and when I need to debrief and pull myself together when I'm feeling exhausted and I want to remember why I'm doing this, and it's
Mm,
really only because I'm suddenly just exhausted. I pull that little box out and it just instantly re-energizes me.
mm,
Um, pictures and text messages, and then I remember, like, I did something good for somebody, even though it
yes.
didn't seem like much to me, because sometimes I don't even know what it is I'm doing. They're like, "Oh, you did such a great job." I'm like, "What did I do?" And they're like, "You just made it easier." And
Mhm, mm,
that's everything to me.
mm. No, and the fact that, yeah, it centers you. So when you see that, it's just a confirmation. It's a confirmation that you're on the right path. And so anytime you see the box, see the little memories when you're having a hard time, this just brings you back to your center, and you know that you're on the right path. You're doing the right thing, and that you'll continue to add more things to that box and continue changing lives. Um, one moment at a time, because as we were
Mhm.
saying, one moment at
Yes,
a time.
literally
So
one moment at a time.
thank you so much, Alexa. Is there anything else you wanted to share that I might have not asked that you want to leave our audience members with? I know you've said so many good things here that are life lessons for all of us, for sure.
Um, I don't know. I I don't have anything really profound. Um, I try to live by a code of kindness and compassion for people, from all walks of life. And, I think the world right now could use a little bit more of that.
Yes, indeed. I was just going to ask you that. That's a slogan we should all live by, living by compassion, and we're in the middle of a lot right now. And that how would you actually, in that, how would you even give your perspective of grieving? Oh my gosh, I'm going to add to this call, but to this recording by asking you this, but what would you
Okay.
say in terms of the grieving of processes and changes like what we're experiencing right now in our world, where as we're recording this, we're still in the middle of COVID. We're also now with the awakening, really, because of a lot of us that were sleeping and not stepping into creating change for justice in this world, and especially right now here in the United States. So what would you say would be something that you see in this process of grief and reawakening that we're having?
Um, when I think about everything that's happening around us, even globally,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
um, but I guess in America in particular right now, the United States, uh, there are some individuals who are disconnected from the experience of fellow humans. And they are disconnected because for two reasons. They offer sympathy when right now a lot of people are really in need of empathy to drive change.
mm-hmm,
And I think that in terms of grief, grief j- in a general way is a
mm-hmm,
response to a loss. And I think for the African American community or people of color in general in the United States, they are still kind of collectively grieving a loss that occurred hundreds of years
hundreds
ago
of,
and
yes,
has just
thoughts.
perpetuated.
Oh yeah, good. Yeah.
And, you know, the other demographic, the white Americans, can't relate to that loss.
Mhm.
And so sometimes it's hard to offer empathy, really put yourself in someone else's shoes to understand the heartache, the rage, the anger, the frustration when it's perpetuated and when you tell somebody, I'm hurting because it happened then and it's happening now, and your pain is dismissed as, you know, irrelevant.
How you tied that into the fact of not being able to relate is so similar to when somebody tries to offer sympathy in that moment of grief when somebody's passed away, and you're trying to give condolences, but at the same time, if you haven't had a similar loss, and even sometimes when you have had, now again, and here I use the word loss, a death in your
Mhm,
family, when you haven't had a death in your family and you're trying, or even if you have, but the way you experienced it is different than the individual you're giving condolences to. So therefore, even if you have a similar, you both have had an experience of death or loss or anything, it's still hard to even know what to say because the person's experience is different than yours. So right now
mhm.
we're all kind of living in that. It's like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know with what I'm going to put out there right now to support this movement and this awakening is right because it's coming from my perspective, but somebody that's maybe reading or listening to what I'm saying and their perspective's different may take it a completely different way because it's a different experience, even though it's
Exactly.
a collective." And so that the empathy and I think it also has to go both ways, right? So for the person that's receiving, I've received condolences in ways that sometimes don't necessarily feel like it's the right words I wanted to hear. you know, like I'm like, "Oh, well, that's not exactly what I wanted to hear right now." Like, it's like the it's gonna be okay type of thing, those kind of feelings, but you know that it's coming from a good place of who the person's saying. And so therefore you take it and it's coming from a good place. And I think right now that's a little bit of what we need in this world is for all of us
Mm,
to have also a little bit more of compassion towards each other and a compassion towards each of our journeys of growth that we're all experiencing right now. Um, so that if we say the wrong thing, like as long as it's coming from the right place in our soul and in our heart, that it's taken in that by the expression of what it's being shared. I don't know if that can relate
It
a
it
little bit to it.
does.
Mm,
It does very much so, and, you know, I guess in that same respect, it probably sounds ironic or really strange that even me, as a hospice nurse, having
mhm,
done this for a number of years, one of the hardest things for me to do is not delivering the the bad news. It's trying to offer condolences
mhm.
because as much as I've experienced the dying process with a family or the disease process with a family, I can never be that family member. I could never be that patient, and I could never truly experience what they've experienced.
Mhm.
And so, as much as I've seen it and as heartfelt as my condolences might be, I always wonder in the back of my mind if it sounds scripted.
Yeah. Yeah. But if as long I think that it's like you're true, where it's coming from, you cannot control how another person's going to receive it, right? You can't
Mhm.
control that because that's not something you don't know everybody's background. So again going back to even what we're experiencing right now in the world, again, all of us, as long as we're coming from a place of trueness and of heart and of love, if it's coming from a place of love, we can't say the wrong thing. It may be heard differently by everybody, but in terms of who we are, as long as we're saying it from a place of love, even if we say the wrong thing, it didn't come. There I'm getting all twisted because yeah, so many of us are not saying the right things at moments like this.
And a lot of it, I think, is just it's the energy you put out.
Hmm.
You can say anything you wanna say, but the energy and the emotion behind your words speak louder than the words that you're actually
Yes.
saying.
Yes. So sometimes do you find that even then when you're saying the condolences, that sometimes not even the saying the condolences, just the actual, just the fact of just sitting with somebody in that moment is just, it's just as powerful, offering that you're just going to be there, being a listening ear, or, just offering that support. That, do you feel that that ends up being the most like appropriate almost response in general, that is like the safest way to go in terms of
Yeah,
condolences?
sometimes that is my answer. That's my
Yeah.
response. I can remember two very specific instances where there were two different individuals, but I know that I sat um, rather awkwardly, it would seem,
Mhm.
but it meant something to these people. I felt like I was out of place, but apparently my presence made such an impact on them, where I just sat for hours while they cried.
Mm.
And that was it. And each time they turned around, and I mean, it was like 3, 4 hours, and they said, "Well, thank you for thank you for just being here."
Mm.
And that's what they needed. They just needed someone to be a presence in the room while they, you know, cried their tears.
Mm.
Because
That
I
just
don't have all the
centering.
words. Yeah.
Right. Right. And then how would you translate that? And then how do you think that we could be that in moments in like right now in which everybody is experiencing so much distress with everything, with jobs, you know, people losing jobs right now, with everything, with the what's going on in the world, with the, again, with the African American community in our country needing justice and things like that. How do you feel that we can translate that same being present into this circumstance?
I think that if each of us as an individual really truly reflects on who we are and what our core fundamentals are as individuals, and then listen to the stories of others with an honest understanding of who we are and what our core values are, only then can we move forward. Because if we're not being honest with ourselves and who we are and what we fundamentally believe in, then we can't be honest or listen with an honest ear to anyone else's situation. We just can't do that.
That is that is the cherry on top of advice right now. Ding, we can like put that cherry on top, and that was the bow to this conversation. Thank you, Alexa, for that knowledge and like being able to navigate this conversation with me as we take people from hospice into how that can relate to this, realness that we're experiencing right now, and how your experience as a hospice nurse and your viewpoint in seeing death and speak. I mean, gosh, there were so many different things. This is like, I don't even know what I'm going to title this podcast. I don't even know. I'm gonna have to come up with something really good so people know how much nuggets they're gonna get. Thank you once again, Alexa.
Oh, well, thank you so very much again for having me and inviting me into your life. I do not take it lightly and I don't take it for granted. So, thank
Thank,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief Gratitude and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.